On this channel, we love hearing stories about people who were nearly taken, people who barely survived their creepy encounters. But today's episode is a darker one, featuring stories centered around people who allegedly did go missing. Sometimes it's more than people just getting lost. Sometimes humans and supernatural forces alike enjoy taking our loved ones forever. Enjoy these allegedly true scary stories, and be sure to send me your stories at darkstories.org. I'm looking to narrate some trucker stories and scary stories from specific Native American tribes. Be sure to follow the show and review it on iTunes or follow us on Spotify. Now, let's begin. The Missing Boy and the Pale Man, from Wren is Lost. I'm half Native American and grew up in an isolated town that boasted an impressive population of 96 people in total. In my beliefs and the beliefs of my community and family, there are benevolent spirits and there are malevolent spirits. Some are human and others are not. Many go unnoticed by people, blending into the background. Some are retold as legends and stories and cautionary tales, and some become notoriously known on the internet, like the Skinwalker and Wendigo. This story is not about skinwalkers or Wendigo. Or maybe it is. I honestly don't know what it was that I saw and felt, but I know for certain that whatever it was the thing that took a young boy from our community. Whether you believe my story or not, it doesn't change anything, unfortunately. The boy is still missing and presumed dead, and has been for well over a decade now. Before I share with you the details of the case, you need to understand how things were where I grew up. Calling us a rural town was putting it politely. We were extremely remote. The next nearest town was well over an hour away. My town was mostly made up of other people in the tribe. It was this small logging town tucked deep into the mountains. Everyone knew each other, and everyone knew the same local superstitions and stories. There were quite a few unusual stories surrounding the forest in our town, some of them involving inhuman spirits. I had explored those forests since I was very small, probably too small. I have memories of being as young as 3 or 4 years old and being deep in the woods alone, but feeling perfectly safe, as if there was something in the forest that was protecting me. And I'd return to it time and time again to feel safe, safer than I did at home with my neglectful and abusive family. There were other things in the forest that I can't really describe, but when you lived there, you learned over time on how to read the forest, understanding when it was safe to be in it, or if you needed to keep your wits about you. Every once in a while, you could feel something on the dark edges waiting there, as if needing an invitation to come closer. Sometimes, that dark presence would follow. There were many times when I was older and riding my bike along the old logging trails where I felt it there. It was always this familiar feeling, but something dark, something inappropriate. Sometimes you could hear it call your name, but I never answered it when it did. Some instinct in me told me that I should never acknowledge it, never speak to it, and absolutely never invite it closer. And then, as soon as it had appeared, it was gone, and that feeling of the goodness in the forest would return. This was kind of the usual thing for most of us living out there, especially the loggers. Just one of those things that we knew was unnatural, but something we lived with, keeping it on the outskirts until someone invited it in. The boy who went missing. I can't be sure of what happened on his end. I can only tell you about this case from my experience with it, and from what others have told me. and what I later felt and saw. This boy went missing on a winter's day where almost 2 feet of snow had fallen overnight. He uncharacteristically left his home that morning and simply disappeared. It was cause for immediate panic, and a local search and rescue party had mobilized before law enforcement could reach us. The boy had suffered from health problems and required medication to function correctly, medication that he uncharacteristically did not take with him. The last eyewitness who saw him was able to give a direction of where he traveled, and his footprints were found in the snow fairly quickly. This is where things begin to become strange. At this point, law enforcement had arrived and had brought along more search and rescue operatives, as well as search and rescue canines and rugged terrain gear, including snowmobiles and climbing equipment to navigate some of the harsh terrain. They followed the boy's footprints off-road and through terrain they had extreme difficulty navigating through, even with all that gear. And in some cases, it was impossible to get through. And yet the boy's footprints persisted on for miles, until search and rescue operatives took note of something disturbing. At a certain point, seemingly out of nowhere, the boy's footprints were joined by the footprints of someone or something else. They were described as long strides that looked as if the boy were being led deeper in, and then both sets of footprints vanished for miles in the snow. There was just nothing. Several miles away, a secondary team who had gone ahead in the boy's direction of travel radioed in that they had found the footprints again, and were able to validate them as his by the unique design on the sole of his shoes. Again, the same thing happened. The footprints began as only his, and were eventually joined by something else. And then, once more, they vanished into nothing. The search had begun in the morning and went on well into the night. It wasn't until the next day that one of the boy's shoes and his hoodie washed up where the river emptied out. His body was never found. Shortly after, he was presumed possibly deceased from exposure, but the search would continue for a long time. At this point, you're probably wondering how my first story and this connect. Remember, you get to decide what you accept as the truth, but just because you accept one truth in one way does not mean it's not true in another way. Earlier in my story, I mentioned that locals could feel the forest and things present in it, including that dark presence that lingered just out of reach, following, speaking our names. After the boy disappeared, this thing was no longer on the outskirts. It had become the forest. I mentioned when I was smaller, I would go into the forest to feel safe, to feel secure. Shortly after the boy went missing, I went to visit my secret place in the woods like I had thousands of times before. But I couldn't. I got to the edge of our property, and I could not will my body to pass through our gate and into the forest. My body was frozen and trembling. My heartbeat was so loud it was all I could hear, and my legs felt like jello. This suffocating sense of doom felt as if it was crushing the life out of me. To put it in layman's terms, I felt like if I were to go into that forest at that time, I was going to die. That I would also be taken. Those words were being forced into my brain from something I couldn't see, but something that felt familiar, yet nauseating. My instincts immediately told me that it was that thing I'd felt so often as a child, but that it did not need my permission or anyone else's permission anymore to be there. It made the forest change from feeling peaceful and alive to sick and decaying, a stagnant place where no light could reach anymore. I tried to go back in several other times, and I had the same reaction each time. Even my ex-husband, when I took him there, had a similar reaction, despite never giving him any backstory about the place. He was a firefighter who specialized in wildland and forest fires, and he even stopped at the gate, silently staring into the trees. I could even see goosebumps rising up on the back of his neck. Even he said that he didn't know what it was, but it felt like he was going to die if he went in there. Strange things kept happening after the boy went missing. Certain areas of the road through the mountain that were considered fairly safe before suddenly had accident after accident, with most of the victims saying things like there was someone in the road they were trying to avoid hitting, or that they just lost complete control of their car. People drink a lot in this area, and the sad truth is that a lot of those also drive themselves home after drinking. So a lot of people kind of shrugged off the increase in car accidents, chalking it up to the local cafe finally getting their liquor license. I thought this was closer to the truth myself, until it happened to me. I saw him. I know it was him, or it, or whatever it was, because when I saw him, I felt the same suffocating feeling of dread and nausea that I had before. I didn't ask to see him, and I wasn't even thinking about him when it happened. I was driving home from work, and it was dark. I rounded a corner, and I saw what I first thought to be a tall, thin, pale, and possibly nude man standing next to the road sign. I immediately glanced in the mirror as I slowed down to see what I was looking at, to see if he was hurt or if he needed help. It was below freezing, and he looked nude at first glance. What I saw, I sometimes still can't accept. It was humanoid, definitely humanoid, but there was something not right about it, and the more I looked at it, the more things screamed that it was not a human being. The skin was extremely pale, but also very leathery. The arms and legs were simply both too long, and the fingers way too long. The hands and feet of this thing were black, like they had been caked in ash and coal from the fireplace. It had no hair, it had no ears, except what might have been holes where the ears once were. Where its eyes should have been was just empty, but still reflected light from my car, similar to when you shine light on a cat or dog's eyes in the park. There were no lips or nose. The mouth was just gaping open and closed, and was covered in what I hoped was mud, or maybe charcoal. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it wasn't human. I got the heck out of there as fast as I could. It wasn't until I got home and sat down to draw what I saw, so I could see if others had encounters with this thing, that I realized that its height had to have been at minimum 7 or 8 feet, since our road signs are built a lot taller. They can still be seen when we get a lot of snow. Online, the search results for what I saw came up with most results suggesting the Rake, a supposedly fictional, ghostly cryptid that I'd never heard of before this. But the supposed images I saw of it were strikingly similar to the thing I saw. Similarly, those features can also fit a true Wendigo. Sorry if this chaps some people's rears, but Wendigo and Algonquin lore do not look like gangly men wearing a deer skull on their head. But the geographical location wasn't right, even though I'm from one of the Algonquin tribes where that lore originated from. I've since moved out of my childhood hometown, but this whole event is something that has stayed with me in the back of my mind since then. I can't prove it, but my gut instinct tells me that whatever that thing was, it was so desperate to be invited in. It preyed on the missing boy and took him from us. A catalyst to its entry, I suppose. She loved to swim. From Pallas. Many years ago, there was this girl who loved to swim. She would stay in the water for as long as she could, no matter how wrinkly her skin would become. She could stay for hours in the water, if she was allowed to. Her peers, classmates, or friends and family nicknamed her Water Rat, a much-used figurative expression in the country she lived in at the time, for people there to describe anyone who enjoyed swimming a lot. Her parents would sometimes joke that if she stayed too long in the water, that she would stay wrinkly forever. Let's call her Sarah. This is not her real name, but her story is. Sarah was considered a normal girl. She did well in school, even though she had some difficulties and needed guidance now and again. Nothing too much out of the ordinary. The girl had friends, although not at school. So at school, she spent all her time learning and doing schoolwork. Any time she had left after school, she was free to do whatever she wanted to, be it meeting with her friends or swimming. Her favorite thing to do was to see how long she could hold her breath for by swimming from one end of the pool or lake to the other side. Sarah would keep going until she was satisfied enough that she did her best. Other things she enjoyed in the water were tricks, such as doing as many underwater forward rolls as possible before needing to get up for air, or doing underwater handstands. One day, she was alone, swimming at the beach nearby where she and her parents lived. It was during the summer vacation and most people left to celebrate their vacations elsewhere, spending time at foreign beaches, most likely. Sarah didn't mind. She enjoyed spending time by herself. Being with friends was always nice, but as an introvert, she got exhausted from spending time with other people, no matter how kind or helpful they were. As a person, she needed time to herself to recharge. This was such a time. She swam and swam and swam some more. The girl eventually lost track of time, as was normally the case for her when she went swimming. Sarah did some of her favorite tricks in the water. This was the first time she was allowed to swim by herself. Her parents thought she was getting old enough to start venturing out alone. A young woman like yourself should be able to make her own plans without your mom or dad by now. You're barely a child anymore. Well, you'll always be our child, of course. Her mother said while hugging her before she left. Sarah remembered her mom's smile, happy her daughter was becoming mature, concerned that might be going too fast for either of them. Soon it was beginning to get dark. That was her cue to get out of the water and head home. Sarah couldn't remember the last time she'd swam so long. She checked the time. Her phone had stopped working. Sarah thought this odd, as she had fully charged it beforehand, but she didn't think too much more of it. The battery might have simply just died, or something like that. Either way, she would have to check it at home sometime later, when she got back. The young woman hoped she wasn't going to be too late. After having almost run the entire way back home, Sarah got out her keys to the house and put the front door key in the lock. She opened the door, closed it behind her, and yelled out, "Mom? Dad? I'm back!" Sarah heard shuffling from upstairs and from the kitchen. Her mother greeted her as she came from upstairs. "It is way too late. Where have you been?" Her mom stopped right in her tracks halfway coming down the stairs. Her face started to go pale.
"Honey, where did you put the spices I like? I can't find them."
A man's voice came from the kitchen. It was Sarah's dad, preparing that evening's meal.
"Mom? What's wrong?"
Sarah tried to ask. She was worried. She had never seen her mom like this. "Honey?" Sarah's father inquired nicely from the kitchen again. When he didn't get a response, he decided to investigate what kept his wife. He opened the kitchen door and entered the hallway, and his jaw dropped. A sudden rush of fear and anger overwhelmed him. "Who are you? Get out of this house or I'll call the police." As he said this, Sarah's mom cried and screamed.
"Dad, why, what?"
The girl tried to ask what was wrong, what was going on. She didn't get the chance to, as her father was beginning to charge at her. Sarah jumped out of the house, crying, "Don't you dare come here again!" The front door slammed shut after her dad had shouted his final words at her. Sarah could not understand what happened. Thoughts were running through her mind. She wept while walking the streets, trying to figure out what to do. Why had her mom looked at her that way? Why had her father suddenly turned to rage, seemingly intent on killing her? Never before had she seen such fear and rage from either of her parents. I hadn't seen Sarah in years. Her parents had reported her as missing. They'd witnessed a strange incident the day she had disappeared, but other than that, the police had nothing to go on. Sarah used to be my friend when we were kids. I was one of her few friends. It must have been about 6 years after she'd gone missing when I got a strange phone call, and I didn't know what to make of it. The voice on the other end was unclear but very distinct. They claimed to be able to clarify what had happened to Sarah. That's when I was told everything I just told you. I asked how this person knew all this. I was told if I wanted to know what happened to Sarah, if I wanted closure, I would have to go to the beach near Sarah's place the next evening. I had to come alone. It sounded shady, but I needed answers. Just in case, I informed one of my siblings where I was going. I'd made arrangements with my brother on the off chance I would not contact him by midnight. The following day, it was nearly time for me to head to the beach. Everything was set, everything arranged. I sat there at the beach waiting. Daylight faded to dusk, which turned into night. Tiredness seeped in, and sometimes I felt my head bounce around. I was trying my best to stay awake. Luckily, I managed to keep myself awake enough. Eventually, I heard splashing. I got up and headed toward the water. The moon had appeared and shone some dim light across the darkness of the beach and the water of the vast ocean. Near where I'd heard the splashing, I saw a round shape bobbing in the water. "Hello?" I called out, thinking it might be someone out at sea. It seemed dangerous to me someone would be swimming right now in the sea with it being so dark. As a response, the round shape came slightly closer to my position. I was a bit anxious, as I didn't know what to expect. But if it was a person I managed to get out of harm's way, then I was happy enough. The round shape stopped not too far away from where I was standing. It was still in the water, but it was rising up. A short, hunched figure was standing close to the shoreline. By the looks of it, it was human, I thought. "Who are you? Are you the one who phoned me about Sarah?" I asked the human figure.
"Yes,"
an old, crackling voice replied. It did sound similar to the voice I'd heard over the phone earlier. There was a long, uncomfortable pause before the crackling voice continued.
"The Sarah you knew is gone."
"What did you do with her?" I demanded, suddenly, in frustration, surprising not only myself with my tone of aggression, but the other person in the water too. I saw the shape flinch in response.
I don't know,
they replied. What do you mean you don't know? I asked, a bit more gentle this time. The shape stepped closer to me, slowly. Some clouds began to pass over the moon, so I could not make out the person's face when they came closer. They were perhaps only 2 steps away from me.
Just know, Sarah is doing well.
Everyone has been missing her. Where is she? Let her come home, I said, firmly, demanding it, but I felt rather hopeless.
She can't come home. This was a mistake. I'm sorry. Just know she is okay.
They turned around and began to head back into the water. I rushed towards them, grabbing their shoulder. Then I jumped back and immediately let go. Their shoulder felt strange, almost as if it was all dried up. That made no sense. They had just come from the water. The person turned back around to face me. Just as they did, the moon's light was shining again as the clouds had fully passed. Their face, it was all wrinkly. It barely looked human. I was too focused on their face to take note of the rest of their appearance. I did not yell, and who or whatever they were had seemed to appreciate I hadn't backed out in horror or shock.
Sarah will be happy to know you took the news so well. Thank you.
The voice sounded calm and somewhat satisfied. They retreated back into the water. I cannot say for sure I know who or what they were, but whatever happened to Sarah had changed her life forever. Maybe I met Sarah that night. Maybe not. The story I got over the phone, I believed more than ever now that I'd experienced this. Whoever or whatever that was, I have a feeling that they, or Sarah, got more closure than I did. And I hope Sarah is doing well. Gilgo Beach Serial Killer. From Anonymous. When I was 18 years old in the late 90s, my best friend Nicole and I liked to visit Gilgo Beach during the summer. Gilgo Beach was one of many Long Island beaches, but we liked this one because it encompassed both a beach and boat marina with an outdoor tiki-style bar. This outdoor bar is exactly the place where this strange encounter occurred. Nicole and I decided to take a break from sunbathing and took the 10-minute walk to the outdoor bar to get some sodas. Upon arrival, we sat down and waited our turn to order sodas. The area was crowded with beachgoers and boat owners who parked their boats at the marina. There were probably about 24 boats docked. People were drinking and mingling. Nicole was already flirting with an older gentleman who talked about his boat and how he would love it if she joined him on his boat. I, on the other hand, was more interested in quenching my thirst rather than mingling. But that's when a 40-something serious white man sat down next to me. Something about his vibe gave me the creeps. The creepy and sinister look he gave before he even spoke to me permanently embedded his face in my memory.
You know, you shouldn't get on the boats here. Girls get on these boats all the time and go missing, never to be heard from again,
he said with a small smirk. I rolled my eyes and replied, I wasn't planning to get onto any of these boats. But tell me this, why haven't I heard anything about all these missing girls on the news? I read the newspaper every day and have never read one story about a missing girl that was last seen on Gilgo Beach. He responded and said,
because nobody knows about it yet.
Then he got up and walked off. That comment always puzzled me for years until over 10 years later, when police discovered multiple bodies found buried on Gilgo Beach. They're still looking for the Gilgo Beach serial killer. They suspect it was a serial killing team, which includes a doctor and a police sergeant, but could not prove it, so they're free to this day. But the scariest moment for me was when they showed me the pictures of the suspected doctor and police sergeant duo. The man that warned me in a sinister-like way to not get on the boat, or I would disappear, was the suspected police sergeant. I will never forget that creepy face and warning with a sinister undertone.